It's a money fight, I get you, and you want to make money. But at some point in time, if you keep telling us that you're taking boxing seriously and you want to be recognized as a big time boxer / fighter, you're going to have to fight somebody closer to your age, who is a contender at the very least.
Jake Paul fight announcement, another circus act, another clown show. A fight between Jake Paul and Gervonta Tank Davis has been announced as an exhibition fight.
The fight that I couldn't believe, that was too insane and honestly just baffling to think would be a real fight in 2025, reminds you that combat sports are the craziest sports on the planet.
Stephen A. Smith didn't hold back when reacting to the announcement of Jake Paul versus Gervonta Davis, calling it nothing short of a circus. He admitted that Jake Paul knows how to promote himself and turn any fight into a spectacle, but insisted that boxing deserves far more respect. According to Smith, Paul should face opponents that make sense competitively, not just fights built for shock value. In his view, this matchup once again puts entertainment above real competition.
I've always been a fan of Jake because I think that what Jake tries to do for the sport of boxing, I think people don't realize the importance of him being able to promote for himself and not being reliant on the promoters who I believe has held the sport hostage. The only critique I've ever given Jake, I just want Jake to fight boxers. Like Nate Diaz, we know his reputation. We know the man can fight. We know in the octagon he could be something special. But we know you breathe on him, he starts bleeding.
It's a fair critique. And you know what? He should fight boxers, but then again, should he? Because I'll tell you why. If you're a human who can rake in $6 to $10 million fighting people that you know you're going to beat, and you want to build a resume and a record that's impressive with a good highlight reel, you got to be strategic about this shit. Jake's 25, 26. He's got so much time.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is, I get where you coming from. All I'm saying is, we don't know your skill set because you haven't been in there with anybody really skilled.
Analysts argue that Jake Paul's latest matchup is yet another circus act in his boxing career. They claim most of his fights lack genuine competition or logic, being crafted more for attention than authenticity. Instead of challenging opponents who match him in skill or weight, Jake keeps pursuing mismatched and unconventional bouts. To many experts, his fights may draw crowds and headlines, but they do little to earn respect as legitimate boxing contests.
Performance. Jake Paul won the fight. But yeah, that was that. This time, Jake Paul is to take on Tank Davis. Tank Davis, he was recently in the news for being arrested for a domestic violence incident involving one of his kids' mother. He was alleged to have slapped her about the place. The charges were later dropped, to be fair to him. But yeah, that was when he was last in the news. What is interesting is just a couple of months ago, Tank Davis was saying openly that he'd lost his passion for boxing and that he wanted time away from the sport. There was speculation that he might even retire as he was experiencing extreme mental fatigue from boxing, depression, and there were mental health concerns over him. However, I guess the opportunity to earn a truck full of money, fighting a completely worthless exhibition fight against Jake Paul, was enough to make him change his mind about boxing. Funny that, isn't it? But you know what? I'm not even going to waste your time or mine critiquing this utter nonsense. Suffice to say that this so-called fight we're talking about is an exhibition, and it pits Jake Paul, who is a cruiserweight, by the way, weighs in excess of 200 pounds. And Tank Davis, who is, he was the WBA lightweight champion, who weighs in at about 135 pounds when he fights. So that's a disparity of some 65 pounds. In old money, that's about 4.5 stone. There's also a significant difference in height. Jake Paul is roughly 6'1", 2. Gervonta Davis is 5'5" at best. So, there's a height disparity there of some 8 inches.
Ring Magazine tweeted the stunning news that has the boxing world buzzing. Breaking: Jake Paul will face Gervonta Tank Davis on November 14th at State Farm Arena in Atlanta in an exhibition live on Netflix. Sources confirm to Mike Carpenter. Talks for Paul to face Anthony Joshua collapsed over network issues. Paul's last fight took place at 200 pounds, while Davis is A, champion at 135. This unexpected matchup has fans debating size differences, entertainment value, and the unpredictable twists boxing keeps producing. Jake Paul continues to push his own agenda, determined to turn his bold ambitions into reality by investing heavily and generating massive attention. He's managed to shake up the sport in ways few could have imagined. While many criticize his methods as unconventional, others acknowledge that his financial influence has drawn new audiences to boxing. This latest matchup, one no one thought possible, shows just how far he's willing to go.
But again, if it makes dollars, it makes sense. And we've seen that Jake will kind of bounce in between doing these entertainment fights and then, trying to push toward his goal of ingraining himself in the sport of boxing, and kind of does both of them. So it's kind of a weird place to be, because he wants the respect of the boxing fans and the boxing hierarchy and hardcore boxing people. But at the same time, he'll gain some of that and then lose some of it. It's like a seesaw of his fights. Like one fight and be like, okay, that's a real fight, or that's a real fighter. He'll go and he'll win the fight. Julio Cesar Chavez, real fighter, maybe past his prime, whatever, but Jake goes and wins that fight pretty easily, and then gets a lot of respect, gets a lot of the boxing hardcore love. And you have these talks about him fighting Anthony Joshua, and that was going to get even more respect. More people were like, that's fucking crazy. What are you doing? Myself included. That seemed like a massive risk, but a lot of people were like, okay, fair play. Anthony Joshua, that's a real heavyweight. Jake wants to fight him. He's a psycho, but fair play. And then you announce this one, and it's like, well, that's the same thing people have been saying about Jake for years. So it's a weird spot to be in for him for sure. But I talked about this not being the first choice, and I don't think it was, because Coppinger reports next that talks for Jake Paul to face Anthony Joshua collapsed over network issues. Now, we had all heard the talks, and they were pretty public, from Eddie Hearn, from Jake. Nakisa Badarian, Jake's manager, was over in the UK on, I think, Sky Sports, talking about the fight and saying how it was a real possibility and they were really starting to work on it. And now Mike Coppinger says that the talks for Jake and Joshua fell apart over broadcasting issue.
Later, Jake Paul confirmed the fight on Instagram, writing, "Size versus speed, power versus precision. One will rise and one will fall." From Atlanta, live globally only on Netflix, Friday, November 14th. His post ignited even more buzz, turning the exhibition into a global talking point. Teddy Atlas, one of boxing's most respected analysts, weighed in on Paul's rise, emphasizing the effort and sacrifice behind it. He noted that, love him or hate him, Paul deserves recognition for making the fights he envisions actually happen. According to Atlas, this level of control and ambition doesn't come by chance. It requires relentless persistence, heavy investment, and a willingness to trade comfort for controversy. Atlas also highlighted Paul's steady improvement in skill, pointing out that he has spent years training seriously under elite coaches, sparring professionals, and proving he can handle himself inside the ropes. While boxing purists continue to criticize him, Atlas believes many overlook the real work Paul has done to earn his place in the sport.
That I gave too much credit to Paul. Why? He's done a hell of a job to put himself in this position. He sold himself. He sold his dream. He took his dream. He took his idea. He put it out there, and he made it happen. Give him credit for that. And he made it happen. And he took risk along the way. Yeah, he picked his spots. He's in the driver's seat. He gets to pick his spots. He's the one bringing the money. He's the one promoting. Yeah, he's the name. He made himself that, coming from where he came from, with all his followers and the whole thing, and just the uniqueness of what he was doing. But he has learned along the way. He's not a top guy yet. No, I don't know that he ever will be. He didn't have that amateur background and the things that you usually need to be a top guy. But he has improved. He is a work in progress. He is a guy that you got to give him credit that he's respected the sport. He went out there, he's worked hard at it, and he's gotten himself into this position. Having said all of that, this might be a step too far. Now, when I say it, I try to be responsible. I've been in this game 50 years, so I know where not to step. where you could twist an ankle, or worse, you could break a leg or fall down. When I say that with the understanding, too, that Joshua's coming off being knocked out.
The team at TalkSPORT reacted strongly to the news of Jake Paul versus Gervonta Davis, calling it a completely one-sided matchup. Their main concern centers on the massive weight gap. Davis, a natural 135 pounds lightweight known for his knockout power, is stepping up against Paul, who walks around at nearly 195 pounds. To them, the size difference makes the fight unrealistic and raises questions about fairness and competitiveness. This reaction reflects a familiar criticism of Jake Paul's career, that he consistently selects opponents who are either smaller, aging, or from outside traditional boxing. While Davis is at his athletic peak, his physical disadvantage against Paul is undeniable.
Netflix, and that's probably where the problem was. So I think that fight is sort of like dead and buried in the water. And we get Gervonta Davis, man, like you guys said it, is a 135-pound world champion, lightweight world champion. The guy's my height. He's 5'5", and Jake Paul is a cruiserweight. You know, he walks around at sort of like 15 stone. So, and it's an exhibition. So look, if you buy into that, then yeah, fine. But it's not one for me.
Spence, let me ask you this: if you were European champion, right?
Yes.
Before you had to retire, sadly, you were European champion. If you were, how tall are you? What are you at? 4'8", 4'9"?
5'5".
5'5". Okay. If you were in your pomp at European champion and you were 5'5" and you were fighting Jake Paul, would you fancy your chances?
Absolutely. I think, definitely. I think I fancy my chances. I think Gervonta Davis actually beats him as well. He's one of the pound for pound best fighters in the world at lightweight. But it's a bit of a weird one, isn't it? It's like you got a guy of 5'5" boxing a guy of 6 foot plus. Cruiserweight. Yeah, it's just all a little bit odd. I thought if they're going to do an exhibition, perhaps Jake should have picked someone more his size. Look, his last fight against Julio Chavez Jr. Was at cruiserweight. Chavez Jr. was a former world champion at middleweight himself, and that sort of made sense. And it was a good win for Jake Paul. You know, he come out there and he beats an ex-world champion. He gets a little bit of credibility, and you go, right, now you're heading in the right direction.
Analysts from Boxing Scene also voiced concerns, noting that this fight presents no true upside for Gervonta Davis. Despite his undefeated record and reputation for explosive power, Davis faces a lose-lose situation. If he's defeated, critics will say the weight disparity made it inevitable. But even if he wins, skeptics might dismiss it by arguing that Jake Paul isn't a proven elite boxer, diminishing the achievement either way.
I think it's win-win for Gervonta as much as it is for Jake. Jake, it's like, okay, you're fighting a former world lightweight champion. You're bigger, so you have some advantages, even if you're, at a severe skill disadvantage. You're not supposed to expect to do anything, but if you do, it's even, it's bananas for you. It's great. Gervonta, I don't know. What if Jake hits him? Jake's a big guy. I don't know if Gervonta stood next to Jake. Jake's a big guy.
Yeah, he's a big dude.
And Gervonta is small even by lightweight standards.
Right.
So it is a little bit of a David and Goliath fight. It's just, the David character in Gervonta is much, much more skilled. But I guess that's the thought process. As far as what it does for boxing, well, absolutely nothing. But then again, what have Gervonta Davis and Jake Paul really done for boxing in the ring aspect? Because Jake, I am a believer in Jake as a promoter, and I think that he has a future as a promoter, and I think he's done very well as a promoter, and I think his company has done some very good things for the sport, and for young fighters, and for brewing talent and making good fights on that basis. But as far as from fighters' perspective, what they do for boxing from a fighter's perspective, I don't think Gervonta Davis has ever done anything for boxing, honestly. Like I feel like TV has just in this generation, they just create stars, and then they just tell you, okay, we're gonna make this guy the star. It's like they're pre-created, and then they just tell you